One of the most overlooked facts about niacin is that the body can synthesize it from tryptophan, an essential amino acid found in protein-rich foods, but the conversion is strikingly inefficient. It takes approximately 60 milligrams of tryptophan to generate just 1 milligram of niacin. This process, although theoretically a backup system, is far from sufficient to meet the body's daily niacin requirements under normal or especially stressful conditions. Yet this metabolic reality is often glossed over in nutrition guidelines, which assume that as long as one consumes adequate protein, the body will produce enough niacin. In practice, this assumption breaks down in many real-world scenarios. The biochemical pathway responsible for converting tryptophan to niacin involves multiple enzymatic steps and several cofactors, including vitamin B6, iron, and riboflavin, B2. The pathway begins with the conversion of tryptophan into kynurenine, eventually leading to the synthesis of nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, NAD+, the active coenzyme form of niacin. But this pathway is easily disrupted. Chronic inflammation, infection, psychological stress, immune activation, or even mild nutrient deficiencies can divert tryptophan away from NAD+ production and push it instead toward the production of metabolites like quinolinic acid, some of which are neurotoxic or pro-inflammatory. This biochemical diversion is often accelerated under conditions of stress, when inflammatory cytokines like interferon gamma and IL-6 upregulate the enzyme indolamine 2,3 dioxygenase, IDO, which shifts tryptophan metabolism into the kynurenine pathway but away from serotonin and NAD+ synthesis. In these cases, even if dietary tryptophan is sufficient, the end product, niacin, is not reliably produced. This dynamic makes the body's reliance on tryptophan for niacin production a risky and inconsistent strategy, particularly in individuals with chronic illness, autoimmune conditions, depression, or high-stress lifestyles. What's more, people who consume low-protein diets or who follow restrictive eating patterns such as vegan, vegetarian, or low-calorie diets may not get enough tryptophan in the first place. And even if intake is adequate, they may lack the cofactors required to carry out the conversion efficiently. In populations with marginal vitamin B6 or iron status, this pathway can become even less productive. As a result, these individuals may fall into a state of subclinical niacin deficiency, exhibiting symptoms like fatigue, irritability, poor concentration, or mild skin and digestive issues, without it ever being recognized or addressed. Yet most dietary recommendations treat tryptophan-derived niacin as a reliable backup. This assumption is reflected in the use of niacin equivalents, NE, on nutrition labels and dietary guidelines. For example, the recommended dietary allowance, RDA, for adults is around 14 to 16 milligrams NE per day, with the implication that this amount can be achieved through a combination of preformed niacin from food or supplements and endogenous synthesis from tryptophan. However, this overlooks individual variability in tryptophan metabolism and ignores the metabolic bottlenecks that can occur under even moderate physiological stress. The practical consequence is that many people may be operating with insufficient niacin levels without realizing it. They might be eating what appears to be a balanced diet and still fall short because the bioavailability of niacin from tryptophan is simply too low to fill the gap, especially in times of increased demand. The body's need for NAD+ rises during illness, healing, detoxification, intense physical activity, or mental exertion. During these times, relying on tryptophan to provide niacin is like trying to fill a bathtub with a dripping faucet. There's also a broader public health implication. In populations where protein intake is modest and the prevalence of chronic inflammation is high, such as in the elderly, the impoverished, or those with chronic conditions, suboptimal niacin synthesis can exacerbate health disparities. Pellagra, the extreme end of niacin deficiency, may be rare in developed countries today, but lesser degrees of deficiency may still be common and contribute silently to a wide range of chronic symptoms that are attributed to aging, stress, or mental health disorders. In summary, the conversion of tryptophan to niacin is a useful but unreliable biological process. It's a metabolic insurance policy, not a primary source. Relying on it too heavily in dietary recommendations underestimates how easily the system can be disrupted. True niacin sufficiency requires consistent intake of preformed niacin from food or supplements, especially during periods of physiological stress. Ignoring this inefficiency risks leaving a critical nutrient gap that quietly undermines energy production, DNA repair, neurotransmitter balance, and long-term health.